To be clear, I blame Larry Nassar, and I also blame an entire system that enabled and perpetrated his abuse.
Today, I ask you all to hear my voice. I ask you, please do all that is in your power to ensure that these individuals are held responsible and accountable for ignoring my initial report, for lying about my initial report, and for covering up for a child molester.
This conduct by these FBI agents, including the special agent in charge, who are held in high regard and expected to protect the public, is unacceptable, disgusting, and shameful.
If we don't do all we can to get these facts, the problems we are here to address will persist, and we are deluding ourselves if we think other children can be spared the institutionalized tolerance and normalization of abuse that I and so many others had to endure.
Those were some of our most recognizable and beloved Olympic gymnasts: Simone Biles, Michaela Maroney, Maggie Nichols, and Aly Raisman. Larry Nassar is now in prison for life after more than 150 young women and girls testified in court to being sexually abused over the past 2 decades under the guise of medical treatment. But the Justice Department found that FBI officials who were allegedly investigating these accusations violated the agency's policies by making false statements and failing to properly document the women's complaints. Just days ago, the FBI fired one of the agents at the center of these failures. Let's talk now to one of the gymnasts who was in attendance at this hearing. She just gave very emotional testimony at the press conference afterward. Jessica Howard, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you very much for being here.
Of course, it's good to see you too.
I know this has been a really emotional morning for you and for everyone involved. What was it like for you to sit there in that hearing room and listen to the stories of your fellow athletes?
You know, you think you're prepared for whatever might come. That is just not the truth, and that is not how this works anymore. And to be so heartened by the senator's words, all of them, this bipartisan clarity is really something that is moving to hear and to see. And then to hear my USA team teammates, I was visibly emotional and broken up in the back, and it was very hard to maintain myself. But I think today is a wonderful example of how amazing the Senate has done, and I would really like to see some follow through now.
Yeah. We did see how emotional you were. I think at one point you even had to leave the room. What was the hardest to hear?
I don't know if it's anything specific that's the hardest. The hardest thing to me right now is that 120 new victims were trafficked, handed, however you want to say it, to Larry Nassar on his table while these men knew that was happening, and they were discussing how to avoid it, how to promote themselves, and there's just no more basic level of corruption. And thinking of the new victims, I was sitting by Kaylee, and you can just feel how much could have been avoided.
Yeah, it's so sickening for all of us to hear. And in fact, the current director of the FBI, Chris Wray, said that he was heartsick. That's his quote by all that he heard today. But it sounds like, from what you said and from what your fellow gymnasts have said, you've lost faith in the FBI doing anything right here.
Well, look, I get the game at this point. It's been 5 years now, and people are heartsick. I do believe that. I do believe our stories affect them, and I do believe they can feel very deeply what it would be like to be in this position. But what has not happened is any active follow-through. The Senate is the only body that has followed through, and to hear another massively powerful individual say, we're going to set up, however many policies, procedures, and rules so this doesn't happen again, when the very simple truth is, if one person had picked up the phone, if one person had filed a report and stayed on it in the face of such glaring violence, at least 120 women would have been saved. And not women, children.
I mean, that's one of the most devastating parts of this, is that Michaela Maroney gave her testimony to the FBI. She was brave enough to come forward. She went through that grueling phone call that she described, reliving it all. That was 2015. And then there were more than 100 victims after that.
And I wish I could, I wish I could say Michaela's experience was completely individual. I don't know of any of the victims that came forward early on that were not diminished, that were not told flat out that that it wasn't enough what happened to them. And what she said and what they felt has been so keenly felt by so many of us that it's really hard to put into words at this point, and it feels, again, redundant, but like we were told we don't matter, we're told we're worthless, and then we tell somebody about this kind of abuse to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, to the highest level of law enforcement in the land, and then you're still dismissed and nothing happens. I mean, there's no answer. And it's the deepest level of corruption I can really think of when you're talking about the sexual abuse of children and the effect it has on the rest of their lives.
Yeah. The last time I talked to you, you described it as a dormant volcano that you all have been carrying around and just stuffing down your feelings and the PTSD about all of that. But in terms of what happens next, where was the DOJ? I mean, Senator Blumenthal called them a no-show today. Were you expecting the Department of Justice to be there today?
It's funny when you start talking about expectations, because I've expected a lot of things. I didn't even realize that I was expecting a lot of things. To say that I expected the DOJ to show up today, it was kind of a given. And the fact that they didn't is hiding behind whatever rule, like a little, I don't even know, but like they did not come. And it feels, even to me as an adult, like they are saying the sexual abuse of children is not an important matter to us. We will not act, and we will push this aside until the media blows over, and then we'll see who we want to see if we want to prosecute. They have evidence, they have witnesses, they have victims, they have every possible thing they need to prosecute individuals that made this possible, and we'd like to see that done. And the Justice Department not being there today shows us that that's still in question.
Who do you want them to prosecute?
Everybody in the report, for starters. Some people were kept on the payroll until the story came out yesterday that this was happening, and then they were unceremoniously fired. But I would like to see the people that were connected, the people that knew what these guys were doing. There are emails, there are chains of command, and you cannot tell me that other people in the FBI offices, at USA Gymnastics, or any of these institutions knew. So I want to see the net to be cast wider, because it is clearly not just one bad apple. I'm so sick of hearing that. And now they try to use the same arguments for all these different institutions, and like, if the whole world is bad apples, then what are we supposed to do when we're abused and when crimes are committed against our person and our body?
Yeah. Well, Jessica, it sounds like certainly the senators who were standing side by side with you today plan not to let this go, plan to do something. And I know that you said this is the first day that you believe something would change. So we are certainly hoping that that is true, and we will continue to follow your story. And you once again have proven you're not just elite athletes, you're elite human beings. And so thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much. Thank
And
you
we'll
for
follow
having me.